So I give Raymont a lot of kidding, but I really want to get serious for a second to tell you some of the accomplishments of this amazing man. So just bear with me for 1 second. So this amazing person that you'll see in a moment has frequently been referred to as a Renaissance man. So one look at his resume and the reason becomes very, very clear. As a lifelong learner with a passion for self-development, personal transformation, transmutation, and self-awakening, he lives his bliss as a teacher, mentor, speaker, author, minister, and more. His life journey has been anything but ordinary, and he's quite the library of stories he's going to share with us today, I'm sure. His mission is to live, move, and be an active member of society who serves to educate, elucidate, emancipate, and awaken and empower people and communities. Through his service and through the transformative teachings, technologies, and practices of New Thought, communities have grown to recognize and realize and materialize their own potentiality and their full divine glory. As a minister, he is actively servicing up and down the East Coast, speaking all over Unity churches, CSLs, all over, where he speaks frequently to, again, Unities and CSLs. In addition, he teaches workshops, which he'll do today, and classes on subject matter related to empowered living, spirituality, service, communication, holistic health and wellness, and authentic living. Again, he came to our attention at the Vista Conference. He made an lasting impression on all of us. I know you're going to be enlightened and inspired by this gentleman. He is currently the senior minister for CSL Greater Baltimore and Lutherville, Maryland. Please give a big SLCA welcome to Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson.
So let's start off with, do you want the good news or do you want the good news or the bad news? Okay, so the good news, let's start off with an opening introduction. How are you today? Okay, so let's be clear, because I often remind people there's a difference between how you are and how you feel. So when you say, how are you? The root essence of your being, how are you? That never changes. Because what we understand of God is that God never changes. Love never changes. Light never changes. So how you are is your beingness. Now how you feel is a completely different matter. And we're not going to talk about that today because we're going to get 567 different answers probably. So we're not going to go there. So once again, let's reiterate. How are you today? See, that sounds like God talking. So now, let's go into the other not so pleasant stuff. I'd like to express how angry I am with this woman right here. Because back in March, remember that back in March? So I want to, okay, so that's one. And then last week, Reverend Dr. David Alexander,
yes,
and he said, let Raymont know that you saw it last week. Well, let him know. Just saying. Just saying. So today, we're talking about this thing called divine mastery. And as a martial artist and a nerd and all this other stuff that, I've had a very interesting life path where, so for many, many years I used to pray every night. This is in my former Christian era of life. I used to pray every night that which I believed God was would kill me in my sleep because I hated my life. I hated everything about my life. Hated everything. An abused child, you name the type of abuse I've probably experienced it one way, shape, or form. It's been here. So I hated everything. Got to the point where I hated everyone. I hated everybody in my family. I just hated everybody. And then, you find things like David Carradine on the 1970s television show Kung Fu.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff starts to seep in. And then you start studying martial arts and you start learning about the Tao and all this stuff, and stuff starts to seep in. And then because, being the nerd, you get to things where you're watching like The Karate Kid and all these other things. And now, the nerd in me loves this era because we get to see Marvel films. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Marvel, but this is Doctor Strange's Eye of Agamotto. We'll talk about that later, maybe. But over the years, because clearly now I don't not like myself anymore. I love myself. I've gotten to this point where I'm not simply happy, but I do my best to live as happiness in expression. So it's like, how do you get there though? How do you make the transition from here to here? And it starts with the realization that there is no here to here. There's only here. There's nowhere we need to go. There's nothing we need to specifically do. It's a realization. So let's start with a question. The teacher in me loves to ask questions. Sometimes the questions are meant to be answered, and sometimes they're not. I will be sure to let you know. This first question is please answer. If I ask you, and I am, to name someone that for you represents a master. And it could be in anything. It could be someone who's great at tennis, someone who's great at golf, someone who's great at cooking. So it doesn't matter what they are a master of. But it's someone that you identify and you say, this person is a master. Name someone.
My daughter.
My daughter. Louder.
Steve Jobs.
More? Anything else? Okay. So now if I ask you to specifically identify what about these individuals demonstrates mastery, are you able to do so? Beingness. Anything else?
Discipline.
Humility, discipline. Okay.
Consistency.
Commitment, consistency. Okay. Do you realize that the only reason you can identify someone else as a master is because you have it within you?
Yes.
I mean, think about it. If I ask you, anybody here speak Japanese? A little. Arigato. Oh, arigato. Domo arigato. Okay. Sugu ichi ekaeremasu ka? So if I say, I will pay you $750,000 for every tengu that you bring me, and $250,000 for every oni that you bring me. But you cannot research it, you cannot go to Google, you cannot go to the Jewish Community Center and say, excuse me, he said something about the una or something, I don't know what he said, but can you help me find one so I can get some money? You have to go strictly based upon what you know right now. Who in here can find one for me? Who would collect the check?
But we don't know what it is.
Right. You can't find it or identify it because you don't know what it is. But if I tell you what it is, well, we got one person who can, I'll write the check for you. 2 people. So if you know what it is, though, and I ask you to find it, for example, if I say, find me a statue of a samurai, can you do that? Yeah. Yes, because you have somewhere in your reference point, you have a file cabinet of consciousness that you can go and say, samurai, A-B-C-S, boom, samurai. It means you have something within you already that knows what that is and can identify it. It's the exact same thing with mastery. You can identify someone who demonstrates mastery because it's already within you. What is namaste? That which God is, in, through, and as me, sees and recognizes itself in and as you. That which God is right here, present right now. But see, the thing we tend to do is we make the erroneous mistakes of still anthropomorphizing God, still thinking of God outside of ourselves, or thinking of God in us, but not being us. Meaning, we'll talk about God, God is incarnated, or the individualized presence of, we'll talk about it when we are praying, but not when we're living. Not when we're standing in line at Kroger's. It's a little bit more difficult, especially when you're in the express line and you look up and you see someone paying in coins only and coupons. 6 items or less and they have 36 items or more. It's a little bit more challenging. But the thing is, it's possible. Because if God is a circle whose circumference is
Everything.
God is a circle whose circumference is nowhere, but whose center is everywhere, then right now where you are is the center of God. And everywhere you go, therefore, the center of God is. And see, we talk about things like invoking God. Like we'll pray and we're invoking God. But if God is everywhere and everything, there is no God to invoke, so we evoke. We bring its presence, the awareness of, from what we are into where it already is. It's a shift in consciousness, knowing there is no here or here to get or straddle or be, but there is only right here. Anybody see the film Karate Kid? Yes. The original one? And I'm gonna talk about the Jackie Chan one too, though. So, do you remember how Mr. Miyagi taught Daniel karate?
Yes.
Wax on, wax off. Wax on right hand, wax off left hand. Sand the floor. Paint the fence. Paint the house. And Daniel got to the point where he's like, I'm tired of you making me do this work for you. And Miyagi said, sure, wax on, wax off. Wax on. And he makes him go through the movements. Daniel's like, okay, what's the point of this? And then Miyagi says, and he starts throwing punches, and Daniel's like, I didn't know I had it in me. But it came out. And then, fast forward, Jaden Smith, Jackie Chan, Karate Kid. Wasn't karate, it was actually kung fu, but nonetheless. It took me a while to wrestle with that idea. They're two different... Who am I to ask? Question. So, put the jacket on. Take the jacket off. Throw it on the floor. Pick it up. Put it on. Put it down. Put it... And then he gets to the point where same thing. Go through the movements, and then Jaden is like, I know kung fu. If you're God, you're the divine showing up in human form. As Ernest Holmes says in Healing Anatomy of Prayer, God in me, as me, is me. God in me, as me, is me. God is me. And I often tell people, because people are like, man, that's a little sacrilegious. You shouldn't talk about it. I love cake. Chocolate. Somebody, oh, I love you. I love all of you, but chocolate cake. So if there's a chocolate cake, and I take a slice, took a slice, is this all of the chocolate cake? No. But how much of this is chocolate cake? Oh. We are not the entirety of, but the entirety of what we are is. But we don't live like that. We don't walk the walk of that. And I understand why. It's easier to play small. It's easier to identify with the flesh. It's easier to identify with, hello, my name is Raymont Anderson. I was born March 25th, 1966. I'm an Aries. I'm 5'10" and 170 pounds right now. It's easier to identify with that stuff. It's easier. But see, the thing is, when we understand that it's not just meditation, prayer, walking a labyrinth, or whatever it is that is a spiritual practice, we understand that everything we do, if we're God, everything we do is God doing it. So washing dishes now becomes a holy act. Walking the dog and pooping scooping becomes a holy act. everything becomes God doing this. So what is the consciousness when we identify this? What becomes the consciousness? Because there can still be things that I really don't like doing it. But when I flip the idea and shift in consciousness that even though I don't like the idea because this doesn't bring me pleasure, can I still be grateful for knowing that that which God is doing this? Can I step into that awareness and live, move, and have my being from there? What changes in our lives? How do we elevate and shift consciousness then? Driving down the street, and how many people love traffic? I see ne'er a hand. I see one hand. I think you're lying, but it's church, so I'm not going to call you out. But just saying. Just saying. But we got one person, loves traffic. But what if we get into that consciousness of everything happens by divine order, because there is only the divine. So there's nothing that can happen outside of God. And everything is happening within God. And God is keeping Saturn where it is, and Venus where it is, and every star where it is, doing exactly what it does. If I had to breathe me, let's just say I might not be here because sometimes I forget my car keys. And if I had to breathe me and remember, the shopping list, I'd have eggs but no breath. Sometimes. But God is breathing itself as us. We're not breathing ourselves. There are moments in there where we can modulate our breath, take a longer inhale and hold, and a longer exhale and hold. But ultimately, it's God breathing itself. So why do I feel the need when I'm here to be like, me? There's absolutely nothing I can do about this. Beeping the horn doesn't make, it's not like Moses. Part, or Jim Carrey. It's like, it's not going to part. So why not just simply be still and know? They cut me off, and I want to salute. But I won't. I will pray. What changes in our lives? Kung Fu is actually not, technically, it's become a martial art, but technically Kung Fu is not a martial art. Technically, when you're doing whatever this is, technically, it's wushu. Kung Fu actually means dedicated and disciplined hard work. So anyone who is dedicating themselves to, say, mastering 11 instruments and playing the ukulele is practicing Kung Fu. How many people in here cook to the degree that you put your foot in it? You're practicing Kung Fu. Practitioners, you may not think of what you do as Kung Fu, but it is Kung Fu. You have dedicated yourself to knowing and speaking truth. Was it easy? Did you just walk in and say, hello, my name is Bob, I'd like to be a practitioner? Oh, I got the degree, thank you. There were classes, there was work, there were tears, there was snot bubbles, there were things that we experience in going through shedding stuff to get to truth. That's Kung Fu. Anything that you dedicate yourself to, going through the hard work to develop mastery of it, is Kung Fu. Anything. So, how do we bring all of this truth to the most painful and difficult aspects of our lives? For example, I tell this story pretty often that several years ago I'm walking in Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C. Just met with a friend and we were talking about Joel Goldsmith and all things metaphysics. And I'm walking down Constitution Avenue, minding my own business, minding my business, and off in the background I hear, nigger! And I keep on walking, like I didn't register. And I keep on walking. And I hear it louder and closer. And then I see a group of people over here, look past me, which made me follow the eyesight. Oh, there's a truck of young men screaming at me that word. And then I realized, oh, they're talking about me. Wow. My first thought was, if I was Professor Xavier or any one of his students, Jean Grey, why not? I'd have levitated the truck, turned it slightly at an angle, and shook it vigorously. Once they all fell out, I would have blessed them. What are you talking about? But because I do not have that skill, I went with the skill that I do have. I prayed. So I just stood right there, feeling everything that I was feeling in the moment. Feeling what all of the people who marched, who took bullets and billy clubs and dog bites and hoses, feeling all of them rushing to my aid to say, we've got you. We've got you. I anchored myself and said, God is all there is. So God is in that truck. God is the truck, and God is the 5 young men in the truck. Why would God? Because they don't know. So let me know for them. And I anchored and I prayed. The light changed. They went about their business, and I'm still praying. Because, sometimes you got to pray. And I'm sure you had some folks up here who said, let us pray. And 13 minutes later. And then the extra 7 to get to the amen and so it is. So, it happens. But you're in it. That's what happens. So I get to the point where it's like, and I'm grateful. And I surrender this and I let it be. And I know it is so. Amen. And so it is. And I open my eyes and I'm surrounded by folks. And I'm like, oh, is this a fight, flight, or flee moment? Because they were around me. And some were crying and they thought I was hurt. They thought I went inward because of what I was feeling. And I had to reassure them, oh, no. I'm fine. They're like, well, what were you doing? Were you calming yourself because you were angry? No, I was knowing the truth of myself and them in this moment. What do you mean you were knowing the truth? I was knowing that God is all there is, and it's right here as me, and it's right here as them. And in knowing the truth of them, consciousness must shift. The law must act accordingly. And they were like, what are you talking about? And so we had a mini prac session. And as a result, they came up to me thanking me. My life has now changed. I don't know why or what just happened, but I know something in me is never going to be the same again. Thank you. And they dispersed. A regular, everyday moment faced with hate, and we can turn and offer love. And it's easy to bypass and say, I have nothing to be angry about. I'm good. God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. Till we get, one-on-one. Can you believe? And I don't believe that they, and yell and argue and fuss and fight. But when you get in front of folks, it's like, oh, yeah, so we are good. We have to get to a point where we understand that everything we feel is natural. Stepping into this thing called mastery, wax on, wax off, it was not pleasant to wax 50-some cars, to take the jacket on, off, down, up, on, off, down, up 50,000 times. It's not pleasant. They're sweating. They're sore. It's like, oh, because if you remember Karate Kid, Daniel was like, I can't move my arm. You made me do this so much I can't move my arm. And Miyagi was like, listen. Boom, now you can. How'd you, shut up, just do what I tell you to do. It hurts oftentimes. And soon as we hit that threshold of, but it hurts. But meditation, I get there and it's like, shant. I don't like to meditate because I get sleepy. I get tired. My left cheek hurts. I thought itching. So we don't meditate. Well, I don't like going to the practitioners because, I don't want them to know my business. So we don't ask for prayer. And the funny thing is, when we do ask for prayer 9 times out of 10, it's when something's not going well. Why are we not praying up greatness? You know what? Today I feel amazing, and I want you to pray with me on how amazing I am, because I know whatever I'm feeling now as a 10, I'm amazing at a 10. I want to feel a 20. What is God? Is God ever expanding consciousness or not?
Yes.
If God is ever expanding consciousness, then should we not ever be expanding greater and greater levels of love, joy, harmony, peace, and beauty? Why do we cap the top here and say, this is enough? I'm happy, and I'm happy to be happy, and oh yes, and leave it, and we leave it there. When you go to a restaurant, do you expect every meal to be just as, well, that's tasty, that's good? Or do you go there and you're always looking for, oh, this was good. Oh, this mac and cheese doesn't have egg in it. This mac and cheese, oh. Can I have some more, please? You're always looking for more, greater greatness, because that's what God is. Go to the aquarium, as we went. Shannon dragged us, but we went kicking and fighting. No, but we went to the aquarium, and you're going in there and you're seeing fish this big, but they're beautiful. And then you walk in and you're like, oh my, that thing is huge. And it's still going, wow, and the grandeur of. Why do we expect in our lives not to see beauty regardless of size? Why do we not expect to have joy regardless of size? Why do we not go in expecting to have and feel more and more and more greater? Since God is ever greater and greater, expanding consciousness, then that means so are we. It's in human form, but so are we. So I often ask people things like, do you believe that there will ever be a time when there is world peace? Do you believe that we can have a world that works for all? Etc., etc., etc. You know how many times I hear, no, it's not possible? Even from our folks. Even from those in New Thought, I hear people say, well, yeah, no, that'll never change. That'll never be. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if we can't even envision it. If we can, now check this out. I've got a very vivid imagination. Because right now I can envision a purple unicorn right here named Bruno with a unicorn horn made of ice cream. Oh, that's good. That's pretty tasty. Chocolate. I can imagine a lot of stuff. And so can all of us. Neville Goddard said that which the imagination is God. Your imagination is God. Then it's time for us to start invoking and evoking and calling forth in whatever language you start where you are to do what you do. Because in the martial arts, anybody here study martial arts? Okay, a Japanese form of a martial art? Okay, so you know, and everybody knows this, you start with a white belt, right? Okay, why? Why do you start with a white belt? What's the white belt symbolize? Beginner, innocence, blah, blah, blah. And then you train. Now, the funny thing is, in Japan, it was just white till it got to black. When America came in, then it went through, so we got white, and we got orange, and we got green, and we got purple, and we got turquoise, and we got burgundy, and we got whatever that is, and let's put a stripe on it. But the idea is you start with the white, and you train, and you train, and you train, and you train, and you never wash the belt. But over time, it gets soiled. It turns gray, and the gray gets darker, and it gets darker to show your level of discipline and practice, and now it's black. And then you train with your black over and over and over, years and years, and then the black belt fades and turns to gray, and then it turns to white. To say we are ever the beginner, always in a state of empty the cup. Don't let them empty the cup. The only time we should be focusing on our cup runneth over is when we are talking about we have more and more love, joy, etc. that we are drinking from our saucer because our cup runneth over. But in terms of our knowledge, we are never full. But we get stuck with this thing called intellect. Anybody in here see the movie Doctor Strange? Okay, so the Ancient One is having this conversation with Stephen Strange, and the Ancient One says, teaching him about, you have to surrender, you have to let go. And Dr. Strange is like, that makes no sense. You gain this power by surrender. And that's just my version of his voice. It's not really what he said. For those who have not seen it, that's just me. And he says, how I don't understand it. And the Ancient One says, your intellect has got you far. How did you learn to reconnect nerves and tissue? How did you learn to heal the spine, bone by bone? And Stephen Strange says, a lot of study, a lot of practice. When we get to that point that we are ready to make everything our spiritual practice, to take everything you come here for and make sure that it extends beyond these walls. So what I often say to people is, and I see Tracy giving me my time, so I'm going to shut up in a moment. I tell people, if you're God, and everything is God, then when you go to Kroger's or Whole Foods or wherever it is that you shop, and you go with this awareness that says, oh, where's cornflakes? Cornflakes. You know what? I think I'd rather have Count Chocula. And you put it back. Why not put it back with a blessing? So that the next person that comes down to take that box of cornflakes feels the vibration that you left on it. In the same way that you know how when someone sneezes and they touch something, and then you're like, oh, I'm not touching that. Because the germs are on it. What if we went out with the consciousness of love is contagious? Light is contagious. This thing we do that is our spiritual practice is contagious. Where I said everything that I touch, I enliven with love, light, and joy. And so someone else who is having a not so great day touches that box of cornflakes and something in their consciousness shifts and they have no idea why. And it's because I sneezed on it. One of the things I often say is, everyone that I see and everyone who sees me sees the face of God. That I touch and everyone who touches me feels the love of God. Everyone that I hear and everyone who hears me hears the vibration of God speaking to itself. And when I go out in the world with that awareness, how am I not making this a world that works for the highest and best of all? Everything becomes an act of God. Everything. You shopping at Starbucks, you getting your car serviced, you buying new shoes, everything becomes a spiritual practice, changing and transforming everything in this world. Let me share one thing, and then I'm done. Don't laugh, that wasn't a joke. Because I know Penelope will come up and she'll start playing music or something. Time for me to go. So two quotes I want to read. One is Eric Butterworth from the book, The Concentric Perspective. What's in it from me? And he says this in the introduction. This ain't even in the book. It's just in the introduction. He says, we sometimes call ourselves truth seekers, but the truth is that there is no need for seeking. We must first learn not to seek out there, for when we seek, there is a tendency to go window shopping, and thus to achieve a consciousness that is a patchwork of metaphysical slogans. Truth is within, not something to search for, but something to awaken to and release. Truth is at the center of you, the mystical point where God becomes you, a point of changeless oneness. You exist, which means you stand forth. You are the activity of God expressing or pressing out into visibility as you. And then Ernest Holmes says in The Healing Anatomy of Prayer, but we do believe this, that we are living in a spiritual universe right now. The universe is a spiritual system. It is intelligent and governed by intelligence. Because it is intelligent, it is a unity. Because there is nothing unlike it with which to divide it, therefore it remains a unity. That which is a unity, whether we think of a unity small or large, because it is indivisible, it is present in its entirety at any and every point. That is what is meant by the omnipresence of God. It really is an axiomatic or self-evident and mathematical and logical proposition that whatever the original creative genius is, whatever God is what we are. There is no difference between the word of truth we speak and the word of truth God speaks. Because when we speak a word of truth, it is truth announcing itself, and that is God, who in his integrity worships God, becomes God, because it cannot be otherwise. And so it is.